The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Before the feast of Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to pass from this world to the Father. He loved his own in the world, and he loved them to the end. The devil had already induced Judas, son of Simon the Iscariot, to hand him over. So during the supper, fully aware that the Father had put everything into his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God, he rose from supper and took off his outer garment. He took a towel and tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with the towel around his waist. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Master, you are not going to wash my feet." Jesus answered and said to him, "What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will understand later." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "Unless I wash you, you will have no inheritance with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Master, then not only my feet, but my hands and head as well." Jesus said to him, "Whoever has bathed has no need except to have his feet washed, for he is clean all over. So you are clean, but not all." For he knew who would betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." So when he had washed their feet and put his garments back on and reclined at table again, he said to them, "Do you realize what I have done for you? You call me teacher and master, and rightly so, for I am indeed. If therefore the master and teacher have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you should also do." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good evening. The disciples were undoubtedly shocked and amazed when Jesus took up the basin and towel and began to wash their feet. He was their master. He was their Lord. Foot washing is not something that masters do. Imagine for yourself the surprise on your face if you saw the President of the United States shining someone's shoes. What would you think if you found the First Lady giving someone a pedicure? In the days of Jesus, foot washing was typically done by servants of one's household. And it wasn't exactly a glamorous job. People's feet get really dry and dirty and cracked when they walk around for miles wearing sandals. To wash someone's feet was an act of hospitality. It was also an act of humility. It is no wonder that Simon Peter told Jesus, "You will never wash my feet." Not his master, not his Lord, not ever. There was Jesus with his wash basin and towel in hand. He knelt in front of them and one by one he washed their feet and dried them with his towel. When he was done, he said to them, "I am setting an example for you. You should do what I have done to you." In that moment, I really wonder if the disciples finally got it. They had been hand-selected by Jesus from the crowds, from the smelly dregs of the farm and boat docks. He called them and gave them new meaning in their life. With him, they were something special. So it is with each one of us. He had elevated the disciples above the farm tools and the fishing boats, or so it seemed. The disciples were special. Jesus did not call them from the crowds of farmers and fishermen so that they would enjoy a greater status. Jesus called them to serve, to carry on his ministry of loving people after he departed. He calls each and every one of us to serve our brothers and sisters, to carry on his ministry of washing feet, so he can continue to live in our world. And I can almost hear the disciples saying and asking, "What in the world are we going to do now?" It reminds me of a story of a close friend of mine that he once told me. He recounted the birth of one of his sons. He stood in the waiting room, nervous as he could be. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a nurse called him back into the nursery to meet his newborn son. Only it wasn't a son. It was sons, twins. He found out he was having twins the minute he looked them right in the face. Thus, this was all that had happened before all of our modern technology about what kind of child it's going to be and whatever else technology might reveal to us. He did not have that at the time. The nurse let him hold both at once. He said he remembered standing there with a tiny bundle in each hand, asking God, "What in the world am I going to do now?" And in that moment, he imagined what God might say back to him. The answer was, "Just love them." I think that's really Jesus' message to his disciples and to each one of us. He was preparing them for a time when he would no longer be with them, and they would be the ones doing ministry, healing, comforting, feeding the poor. They'd be the ones standing in front of crowds of people, staring right into their faces, staring into the faces of sinners of all shapes and sizes, all suffering from their own brokenness and longing to be whole people again. The disciples without Jesus would have plenty of those "what in the world are we going to do" moments. But then they needed to remember Jesus with his wash basin and towel. They needed to remember his example of how he expected them to treat other people. It was like he was saying to them, "See, it's simple. I'm sending you out into the world, into those crowds of people from where I called you. Your job, just love them." And as I was preparing for tonight's homily, those words, "just love them," brought back to mind three people who I think exemplified that for us by their life here on earth. One was Pope John the 23rd. As my mother had given me a biography of his years ago, and I was looking at the pictures in that book, and here is this robust man walking down the hallways of a prison, reaching out, touching the prisoners, signing them on their foreheads with a cross. He visited the prisoners. He respected them. He loved them. And then we look to John Paul II, who sat in a prison ward with the one who had shot him. John Paul forgave him. Jesus says, "just love them." And then we look at our own Pope Francis as he was leaving the hospital just recently. He walks into one of the rooms and he baptizes a baby. He walks out of the room and he encounters a husband and wife with their daughter. He grabs the daughter and holds her and kisses her. And then he blesses both of the parents. Just love them. In the days and the weeks and in the months that follow Holy Week, you will undoubtedly at times see the church look a lot like itself. That's the clean-footed church. You will also undoubtedly encounter and see situations in which our feet look a little dirtier. And you will be around people whose spirits are broken and weary. That's the dry, cracked, calloused, and worn-foot church. And you're wondering, what in the world are we to do? And the answer will come, just love them. I've thought of the many times in my years as a deacon. What in the world am I going to do in certain situations? And God's answer comes back, just love them. Let tonight's image be that of the Lord standing before each and every one of you, with a basin and towel in hand, and the same reminder to all of us, just love them.